We turn to the aftermath of the shooting in Connecticut as the community continues to mourn its losses, resume some routines, and consider its own role in a national conversation on what steps should now be taken. Ray Suarez begins our coverage with this report.
A hearse arrived this morning at St. Rose of Lima Catholic Church in Newtown, carrying the body of 6-year-old James Mattioli, one of the slain first graders from Sandy Hook Elementary School. Hours later, a church bell tolled as mourners greeted another small white casket at the funeral for Jessica Ricos, also 6. Meanwhile, students from other local schools returned to class in buses adorned with ribbons bearing Sandy Hook's colors. Police were on hand, as were counselors.
Making the kids safe and happy. That's all we're here for, is to make sure that they're safe and happy.
Sandy Hook itself remained closed. Plans called for its students to be sent to a now vacant school in nearby Monroe, but it was unclear when.
For what purpose,
back in Washington, a string of Democratic members of Congress took to the House floor, calling for new gun legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need to pass bold, necessary, overdue gun control legislation. If we do not, this will happen again.
20 innocents and their 6 teachers. More tears, more burials. But will we heed its meaning? Will we break the gun lobby's spell?
Outside the Capitol, the head of the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence said Sandy Hook has altered the political equation on guns.
They say Friday's horrific mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School changed everything, and it has. It is a tipping point.
And White House spokesman Jay Carney announced President Obama will back a push for new legislation.
He is actively supportive of, for example, Senator Feinstein's stated intent to revive a piece of legislation that would reinstate the assault weapons ban. He supports and would support legislation that addresses the problem of the so-called gun show loophole.
Late today, the National Rifle Association offered its first statement on the killings, saying it was shocked, saddened, and heartbroken. The group called a Friday news conference and promised meaningful contributions to prevent any future massacres.
We interviewed Senator Dianne Feinstein last night about her push to renew the assault weapons ban. Now we hear another perspective. Virginia Senator Mark Warner is a Democrat who received an A rating from the National Rifle Association. Senator Warner, welcome. We heard that yesterday after the shootings in Newtown, you said that this was a game changer. What do you mean by that?
Well, Gwen, I am a strong Second Amendment rights supporter. I own firearms. On my farm, I've actually got a shooting range. But Friday afternoon, my daughters, who had all come home from college, said, "Dad, you know, how did this happen, and what are you going to do about it?" And you know, just as a father, the horror of what happened in Connecticut, coming on the heels of tragedies at Virginia Tech years before, the tragedy in Colorado, and it seems like about every 6 or 9 months one of these incidents happening in America, makes me say, you know, enough is enough. There's got to be a rational way to sort through this. I'm not saying I've got a perfect piece of legislation, and I don't think there is a single perfect piece of legislation. But in a country where we got 30,000 gun deaths a year, there's got to be a way that we can do a bit more. And I hope that responsible gun owners around America will join in this conversation as well. I think we've got to recognize that it is about rational, appropriate gun rules, but also about mental health issues. And my hope is our country takes a deep breath and doesn't just simply get exercised about this for a few moments and then push this horrible tragedy back into the background and forget about it.
Assuming that there is not one single solution here, let's talk about what you mean by when you say rational gun control. Senator Feinstein says an assault weapons ban would be rational. Would you agree with that?
I think that from the evidence I've seen, that a lot of the challenge comes around the speed by which you can shoot. In effect, these multiple magazines in terms of how rapidly they can be discharged. Now, there's a whole series of different negotiations about what qualifies as an assault weapon and what doesn't. I think there'll be time for that kind of conversation. We've got to find a way to sort through to where there is an ability for law-abiding citizens still to possess firearms. Nobody's going to take away your shotgun, but to make sure that these kind of weapons that in many cases were developed for our military and have become extraordinarily lethally effective killing machines for our military are now in the hands of people that just not appropriate.
The governor of your home state of Virginia has said that he thinks that maybe you should consider arming teachers in classrooms. And the governor of Michigan, who's another Republican, said today decided to veto a concealed carry law in Michigan. Which of these is the right approach?
Well, quite honestly, I'm not sure either of those are the right approach. I think what we need is to be able to have a conversation and be able to have a debate about this. But I'm not sure the notion that, as I've heard some members of Congress say, that if each teacher had been armed, that somehow this would have prevented the tragedy. I believe that we need to look at mental health issues. I think we need a re-examination of some of our gun restrictions, and my hope is that this does not break down on kind of a red shirt, blue shirt, Democrat, Republican kind of issue.
You mentioned the NRA. Let me ask you about that. They put out a statement today after having not said much about this, saying that they are the National Rifle Association of America is made up of 4 million moms and dads, sons and daughters, and that they are planning a news conference to talk about that, but they are prepared to make what they describe as meaningful contributions to help make sure this never happens again. What would you like to hear the NRA? You're a member of the NRA, you're supported by the NRA. What would you like to hear them say contribute as a meaningful contribution?
What are the instruments here that are being used? Are there guns that were developed by for the military as technology has advanced and has allowed our soldiers to become better, more effective in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that all of those weapons be able to be slightly modified and then sold on a commercial market? What kind of, how much restraint does it put on a lawful target shooter if they want to have to change out a clip after every 10 shells or 10 or 15 shells? I'm not sure what the right number should be here, but I think the NRA ought to have a voice in this conversation as well. I think they can go ahead again, reassure that nobody's going to be out trying to say we need to take away your shotgun or take away the kind of components that's a part of American culture in terms of the right to hunt, right to enjoy the outdoors with firearms. But I do think that simply saying that the status quo is acceptable and bemoaning another tragedy 6 or 9 months from now without any real close examination of seeing what laws and rules and regulations need to be changed would be a real mistake and would not be the appropriate honoring the legacy of those poor kids that lives were taken. And quite honestly, I have to give my 3 daughters a better answer than I gave them on Friday night. I got to be able to say, I was part of trying to at least get some level of solution so this kind of tragedy doesn't happen again.
Senator Mark Warner, Virginia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gwen.
Tomorrow night, we'll talk with Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman.